Greetings. I'm Wanda Christensen, Associate Superintendent with CHINOOK'S School Division. I have the distinct pleasure of sharing our journey around social emotional learning over the last couple of years, and so I'm very excited to share what we have been up to in this whole area of learning. Before I go into that, I would like to share some information about CHINOOK'S School Division, just some quick facts, just so you get a lay of the land. We have schools, approximately 43 schools right across from south of Red Deer down to north of Airdrie. So hitting Carstairs all the way up to Penhold, over to Sylvan Lake, and on the west side we would reach over to Sundre down to Cremona, and on the east side we would go from Delburn down to Elnora. So we have 43 schools that have a variety of configurations, K-12s, elementary, middle schools, and high schools. Approximately 11,000 students and about 1,300 staff. About 6 years ago, the division took on new leadership with Kurt Satcher as a superintendent, and him, as well as many folks involved, put together a consultation process, and they designed a brand new mission and a brand new vision statement that really guides our work and is the filter through everything we do. I think it's important to share that because it talks about what we do for every student, and that does help us in our journey with regards to social emotional learning. So it's really important. CHINOOK'S School Division will engage every student in a meaningful learning environment by challenging, encouraging, and believing in them. So what's really important here is we're not just talking about some students, we're talking about every student. Additionally, about 4 years ago, we embarked on a journey with regards to a target, sort of like what is everybody going to work to do? And what's really important is that we have classroom environments that are really geared to help all students experience a quality learning environment. So we put together a document that is really symbolized by this target on the screen. And I share this with you because at the heart of that target, which is what everyone's job in CHINOOK'S is to do, is to approach this classroom and build quality learning environments. At the heart of that target is improving learning for all students. And you'll see surrounding it says relationships and student engagement. And that is really the heart and soul of social emotional learning, is in building those relationships and helping all of our students grow in those areas. So I'd like to take the next few minutes to talk about our journey. Where did it start? About 3 years ago, led by myself, we created a committee called Safe and Caring Schools Committee. And we wanted to ensure that all of our classrooms and schools had that safe and caring culture. You might ask, well, why would we do that? Because weren't your results very good in this whole area? And actually, they were very powerful. We were above average, over 91%, reported by our students and our staff and our parents that they believed that our schools were safe and caring. But we weren't good enough with that. We wanted to do better. So we put together this committee that was composed of teachers, administrators, family school wellness workers, and division office staff. And we decided that we were going to gather a lot of data. So we interviewed our students, we interviewed our teachers, we interviewed our parents, and we gathered data around 3 questions. What's working in this area, what's not working, and what needs to be considered. All of that data really focused our work in 3 main areas, around policy procedures, resources programs, and social media. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the resources programs, but I want to just highlight some work we did around policy procedure because it's extremely important to this work as well. In October 2014, after doing some research and investigating, we actually put together an admin procedure and was implemented in October 2014, and it's called Welcoming, Caring, Respectful, Safe, and Inclusive Schools. And so that was implemented, and we've been supporting that ever since. Alongside that, in the last couple of years, we realized that there was a vulnerable group of students that also needed some focus and attention, and that's our LGBTQ youth. And so we put together an admin procedure called Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. And so we implemented that here just in March. It had been in the works for about 2 years before that. So let's talk about what's the outcomes of the work so far around safe and caring schools. Through all of that data, we actually identified that there was numerous evidence-based practices happening in our schools. There was all kinds of great things happening. But what we realized that most of those programs were delivered by our family school wellness workers, which is a role that is mostly filled by social workers and sometimes people with psychology training or child and youth care. Also, we found that our mental health capacity building staff were also implementing them, which is great. But we realized that the true power of having social emotional learning embedded in all of our classrooms, we needed to engage and ensure that all of our staff had this background and understanding. We also realized that through that process that we didn't have some identified targets or essential outcomes for all of our staff to really move forward and say, you know, how do we know that our students are really excelling in this area, or how do we not know, and what do we do about it? The other initiative that's been going on alongside this work of the Safe and Caring Schools is we have learning support teachers. And these are lead teachers in our schools that work alongside our administrators and other education staff. And their goal is to provide professional learning. Their goal is to ensure that all students are receiving that quality learning environment that we talked about earlier. So we have teachers who have a student services background and teachers who have a curriculum or learning services background, and they work alongside our administrators. The last couple years, we have been focusing on the response to intervention framework, and those of you who are aware of that know that really identifying those critical, essential outcomes is at the near the beginning of the work that we do. Because if we don't know which students are achieving those outcomes and which ones aren't, or which ones actually need to be challenged or receiving a gifted program, we don't know what the targets are. We're not going to have anything to go on. So that work started around our subject areas, like our math and our English and our science and social. But we realized how important it would be to have outcomes in this area of social emotional learning. So this year, to that end, we actually put together a committee, which I'll talk about here in a few minutes. Before I do that, though, I want to just highlight some research. And so all of the data that we had collected up to this point was extremely important for us, but we also wanted to look and see what the research says about social emotional learning and why this is so important to the development of our students. And so we know that you don't have to look too far in the research to realize that academic performance is going to be positively impacted, that relationships and reducing factors around violence or failed relationships and impacting children and youth, their development and their use of substance abuse, it's all going to be impacted in and reducing those factors that might be there if we actually have embedded social emotional learning outcomes implemented in all of our schools and all of our classrooms. And it's not just a matter of embedding it, it's a matter of actually having it real life, real action orientated type of lessons happening in our schools on a regular basis. So that research compelled us to act. In January, we actually built another team of people to put together these outcomes and design them. And so we had another group of teachers, administrators, family school wellness workers. We invited a school health facilitator. That collaborative partnership was important, psychologists. And our goal was to design and create outcomes around social emotional learning from pre-K to grade 12. That was a huge task. We spent 4 long days, and we still need a little bit more touch-up, but we basically got the core work done. We considered the Alberta Program of Studies, so our health curriculum and our CALM curriculum. We used that as a base. We also considered all of the research that CASEL, of course, anyone who's done any work in social emotional learning knows that CASEL is a real guru in this area and an organization that's been doing a lot of research for years. And so we realized that Texas and Illinois, there's schools in those 2 states that have actually done a lot of work in this building and implementing of social emotional outcomes. So we used all of that information, and we came up with 5 general outcomes that no one will probably be surprised to know align very nicely with the 5 competencies that is identified with the social emotional learning from CASEL. So this whole notion of self-management, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness all became very important to this team of educators to ensure that we had those 5 competencies as our 5 general outcomes. Then what we did is we built sub-outcomes underneath each of those 5. So we actually ended up with, across the grade curriculum, we actually ended up with 8 to 10 sub-outcomes underneath each one of those 5. So what's important to note here as well is we realize that it's a continuum, and that a child in grade 8 might not be achieving the same outcomes as other grade 8 peers. So we know it's a continuum, but we did have to, because of organization and implementation, we wanted to organize them into grade levels. So we have them in 4 grade groups: pre-K to grade 3, grades 4 to grade 6, grade 7 to 9, and grade 10 to 12. So we're really excited about that work. What our next steps for this year coming up here ahead of us is to share this journey with our schools and our stakeholders. We are very excited to say that we've got, from a learning support teacher and teacher perspective, we actually have shared some of them and we've got great feedback. And now the journey will take us into sharing with all of our staff and ensuring that all of our educators, whether they be teachers or educational assistants or family school wellness, actually understand the thinking and the research behind it and the approach. And that it's not an add-on for teachers, that this is actually embedded in the work they're already doing, and actually implementing these outcomes is going to be a very much a support and a help to them when they're working with their kids. We also want to ensure that we've got training and support available. So additionally, next year, we're going to continue on with that working group, and we're going to create and develop some screening tools. Because once you have your outcomes, then you can now look at what measures or what assessment tools will help us determine which students are achieving those outcomes and which ones aren't. And then the kids who aren't or maybe struggling to achieve, we know that we have to design some programs and supports for them. So kind of looking at all of that data, we want to identify 4 to 5 pilot schools, and we've got that in the works as we speak. And we're going to take those 4 to 5 pilot schools, and we're going to test our screening tools. We're going to look at the student data. We're going to analyze it. Then we're going to identify some targeted evidence-based practices to put in place to address those students who are struggling. We are also going to provide staff training for those schools and review and monitor the progress as we go along. So, and then beyond that, I wanted to share our journey beyond that as well. So 2017, 18, and beyond, we are hoping then that our pilot schools who have experienced next year's journey will share with their colleagues and their schools, there's neighboring schools in the division as well. So we'll take a look at those screening tools that worked. We'll take a look at the assessment information. We'll take a look at the data. We'll say, okay, how did the students do? What was really working and what wasn't? We'd like them to share what successes they had, what challenges they endured as well. Additionally to that, we will also provide opportunities for all of our administrators, our LSTs, and other staff to receive any kind of training that would be available in the division. So we're thinking about this in a 3 to 5 year plan around how we're going to move forward in this area. I wanted to make a comment around our 5 general outcomes, or the 5 competencies around CASEL. And just to really ensure that everyone's aware that we want to, in CHINOOK'S Edge, we're going to take a developmental approach. And those of you who are familiar with Dr. Gordon Neufeld's work will understand where this is coming from. Because when you talk about social emotional learning as a construct, we realize that we have to consider it as a whole continuum. We cannot just separate it out and expect that kids are going to achieve each outcome at the same time. So I love this picture of an iceberg. And when we talk about a child's behavior or youth's behavior, we realize that there is so much underneath that behavior. There's reasons why they're acting or responding to their world as they are, and that consequencing them or punishing them is not the approach we're taking. We're actually going to find out what's not working. We're going to ask questions about how do we reduce that frustration so that they can move forward and become more competent in their regulation and emotional behavior. So I wanted to make that comment. I thought it was important. Also, when we think about the next years beyond, I wanted to share just some ideas and thoughts around training and what we're planning to do. I've listed and put a few up on the screen, and there's a lot more that we're doing as well. Some of these we've already tapped into. I did mention Dr. Gordon Neufeld. We've already had 3 years of lots of training around his work. We've also had lots of training around Dr. Ross Green and his work around the explosive child. We're also exploring, looking at Stuart Shanker. Of course, he's a guru on self-regulation. Zones of regulation is quite common in our division. Some of the newer ones that we're exploring is this Connect training program for parents. We've actually got 4 facilitators trained. In June, by the end of June, we'll actually have 8 more trained. And this is really important because it's not only about working with our children and youth, it's about working with our families and our parents. And we wanted to ensure that our family school wellness workers had that training as well. Additionally to that, we have a whole group of students who might be on the autism spectrum disorder. They might have a developmental disorder, but they really do need some of that intensive social skill, emotional development as well. So we're looking at the peers training program, have 2 people going to go to get trained, and they're going to come back with that curriculum. One of our schools is also looking at Dr. Wayne Hammond's work around resiliency, and that's called Onboard Initiatives. It's a K-12 school, and they'll be working closely with Dr. Wayne next year. So we're interested to see what that looks like as we move forward. The 4th are strategies for healthy youth relationships is also important. We've got folks trained in the division to bring that curriculum forward as well. The PATHS training is one we're just starting to explore. It's actually it's highly regarded by CASEL, so we're looking at exploring that as well. And lastly there, I put on Mental Health Literacy Project, the core training program by Andrew Baxter from Calgary. We're actually getting some folks trained here in June, and we'll be bringing that curriculum. So it's a large amount of work and effort going into this really interesting journey ahead of us, and we're very excited about it. And thinking that, you know, at the end of 3 to 5 years, that all of our staff will have a large amount of training. They'll be very comfortable implementing the outcomes into their classrooms, and we'll have kids that when they leave grade 12, they're ready for the workforce, and they're ready to move forward and be, you know, really socially, emotionally regulated and competent. So just to close, I love this quote by Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world, indeed is the only thing that ever has. And I just want to emphasize that this is the important work we're doing, and that we need to do it, and it's really important for our children and youth and our families. So thank you for the journey. Thank you for the time that you gave me today. I am so excited, and I hope that you've gotten a few little pieces of gold out of my presentation, and there's some things that might tweak your interest. So thank you very much.